Good morning. This is Christina Osborne from ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'd like to thank you for joining the call to discuss the Capacity Procurement Mechanism Significant Event with the intent to procure additional capacity for this summer. A joint statement from the California Public Utilities Commission, California Energy Commission, and the California ISO regarding this decision was issued yesterday, accompanied by a letter from the CPUC and CEC. Those documents, along with the presentation, are available on the Miscellaneous Stakeholder Meetings page on ISO's website. We are recording the meeting and we'll post the video file at that same location once we receive it from the vendor. Mark Rossiter, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the ISO, will kick off the discussion, and then he'll turn it over to Neil Miller, Vice President of Infrastructure and Operations Planning, who will present the details related to this event. Also from the ISO, who are on the speaker line, we have Anna McKenna, David Zlotlo, Stacy Crowley, Didi Sabakti, Jeff Billington, Joanne Serena, Delphine Ho, Abdul Muhammad Ali, Quentin Foster, and Ginger Quintavala. And let me know if there's anybody I missed. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. You can either press #2 to ask your question verbally, or you're welcome to send the question to me in the chat, and I will read it out loud to the group. Just a reminder to please state your name and affiliation first. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Rossiter.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and good morning. As a result of the events of last summer and in response to Governor Newsom's request that the CPUC, CEC, and the ISO collaborate on several things, including root cause analysis of last year's events, we've also been collaborating on several actions necessary to ensure reliability and minimize the risk of such outages occurring again this year. Since these actions, we've also been actively monitoring the progress on those actions that have been taken with regards to procurement, as well as some of the market enhancements. In May of this year, the ISO published its summer assessment of loads and resources based on the expected conditions that existed at that time. And since publishing the summer loads and resources in May, we have continued to process new information of the conditions that we're facing this summer, including the drought conditions, the status and timing of the new resources that are expected to come online for this summer, the status of existing resources that were expected to be available this summer, as well as resource adequacy showings that are now available for July and August. Furthermore, we are processing the implications of the early and intense heat events that have occurred earlier in the last couple of weeks. The result of these ongoing assessments has led us to conclude that the combination of the changes in expected conditions affects both supply and demand for the balance of the summer and warrants us to continue to take all measures and use all tools in our toolbox to further minimize the risk of supply issues resulting in any outages this summer. Therefore, we are here today to explain the rationale for triggering our significant event under our tariff-based authority for capacity procurement backstop mechanism. Furthermore, we will explain what we are seeking to provide, what we are seeking under this CPM significant event, and we are providing you some additional information how to make offers available for this requested capacity. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Neil Miller, who will take us through the rest of the presentation and guide us through the expected conditions that are leading to this, as well as how to provide additional capacity offerings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's Neil Miller here. I will walk through the deck. If I could move to slide 2, please. So just to build on what Mark indicated, that yesterday the ISO issued a market notice soliciting capacity offers for procurement through the ISO Significant Event CPM mechanism, which is a capacity procurement mechanism designed to allow us to access additional capacity when we see that there's a reliability need, and I'll touch on that in more detail. Some of the key points of yesterday's market notice, though, indicated that a combination of factors have created both material differences from the resource adequacy program assumptions and material changes in system conditions. We are seeking offers as soon as possible, preferably by July 7th, for non-resource adequacy capacity that would be available at a minimum during the hours of 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Imports should be deliverable to the ISO and supported by firm or reasonably equivalent transmission rights to the delivery intertied to the California ISO system. And at this time, as we indicated, the significant event that is leading to the need for this mechanism is expected to last through October. Now, to set some context on CPM, or Capacity Procurement Mechanism Significant Event, if we could move to slide 3, please. We've provided the definition here out of our tariff around what constitutes a CPM significant event that enables us to pursue this additional capacity. And it largely is focusing on a significant or a substantial event or combination of events that results in a material difference from what was assumed in the resource adequacy program for purposes of setting the original RA capacity requirements, or that produces a material change in system conditions or in operations that creates a reliability risk, and in particular a reliability criteria gap from the cushion we seek to plan for in managing the summer ahead. Now, the reliability criteria here that we're referring to is the planning reserve margin that's used to set and establish a cushion under normal operations to handle reasonable variations in load and supply conditions. Now, that cushion is part of our planned approach to avoid having to call on the type of emergency measures should we run into a capacity shortfall situation. Now, if we could move to page 4, please. This slide repeats a bit of what Mark was already referring to about the factors that are creating particular concern for resource sufficiency as we look at the summer ahead. In particular, there's the significantly reduced hydro conditions due to the worsening drought situation, unforeseen limitations on thermal resources and their output. The extreme heat events that Mark already referred to are not only occurring, but are also occurring unseasonably early this year. Some new resources that were expected to come online have been delayed. There is uncertainty of further development of demand-side resources in response to emergency procurement authorizations, where these are measures that would help once we're into a supply condition. We also see that the resources sufficient to meet the peak demand are not always adequate to support the demand through the rest of the day, particularly later in the day when wind and solar resources may not be available. We also recognize that the timeline of the resource adequacy compliance processes provide limited opportunity to address the changed conditions in the near term, so we do need to be careful that we've used every tool in the toolbox to go into the summer as well prepared as we can be. If I could move to slide 5, please. In particular, when we're referring to the significant event, we have determined that these combined factors cause what our tariff considers to be a significant event, which is primarily that the assumption that a suitable planning reserve applied at the time of peak load would also provide reliability 24/7 is no longer valid due to the changing conditions across the day and the implications at the net peak hour later in the day when the solar resources are tailing off, but our customer loads continue to remain relatively high due to the weather conditions. The other risk factors that I outlined on the earlier slide also increased the need to address these changes and these assumptions immediately, that given the heightened level of concern regarding these other factors, it is more important that we move as soon as we can to ensure that we're going into the summer with that planning reserve margin supply cushion as fleshed out as it can be. The ISO stack analysis that I'll also talk about later in this deck provide more clarity on the gap associated with the changes of those assumptions. Next page, please. We did want to reinforce that both state agencies, the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission, leadership has also expressed strong concerns about the worsening conditions. As we've noted, that on June 29th, we did receive a letter from both the President of the California Public Utilities Commission and the Chair of the California Energy Commission, highlighting the factors that I've already discussed, and also requesting that the ISO use its tariff-based authority to procure additional capacity in response to these conditions. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to start diving a bit more into some of the technical jargon. I'll apologize for that, but it is necessary to set the context. That the next set of slides will be talking about the analysis that we've done at the ISO, comparing the net qualifying capacity, which is the amount of resources that are physically available, to the volume of resources that have actually been submitted into the resource adequacy program that have been procured by load-serving entities to meet their resource adequacy program obligations. And in particular, I need to reemphasize that the planning reserve margin is a critical component of that in assessing the supply cushion we have to address reasonable changes or fluctuations in load, forced outage rates of the generation supply fleet, as well as maintaining an operating reserve margin that's necessary to keep the system reliable on a minute-by-minute basis. If I could move to the next slide, please. So I'm going to walk through some of the key points out of the ISO's analysis that's referred to as our 2021 stack analysis. Now, to be clear, the stack analysis is a relatively simple but straightforward mathematical exercise of tallying the resources that are available and comparing them to the forecast load, and we are relying on the California Energy Commission's monthly load forecast for the summer, the most recent Energy Commission forecast, and examining how much of a planning reserve margin or supply cushion exists under the two separate conditions. So, the stack analysis that I've referred to has been used in the past and already is a matter of public record, as it's been used to support comments both in our Public Utilities Commission resource adequacy proceedings and has also been used in demonstrating the need for system reliability must-run designations that were issued by the ISO. In this analysis, we do use the forecast updated to the latest Integrated Energy Policy Report product produced by the California Energy Commission. We use the generation capability list produced and downloaded from OASIS. We've provided the specific date for a point of reference. We also look at the net qualifying capacity list, and we've provided the reference to the date when that was drawn from our own website. And I should mention that the qualifying capacity for resources is first determined by the Public Utilities Commission. The ISO then looks to make any further adjustments based on transmission limits, which produces what is called the net qualifying capacity value, or NQC value. We have included new resources that are expected to be online as we move through the summer, both including resources that have achieved commercial operation date but are not yet on the NQC list, as well as resources that have not yet obtained reach their commercial operation date, but are expected to be online through the summer. We've also compared that to the monthly resource adequacy showings for imports and other resources that I'll talk about on the next slide. Now, moving to page 9, this table sets out some key parameters around what our assumptions are in assessing supply adequacy looking at imports. The first row is the actual 2021 resource adequacy showings for contracted imports that have been provided by load-serving entities, and we've provided the values there both for July and August. The values for September, the completed values are not yet available. I've grayed out a few columns or a few rows here because they may be of interest, but they weren't used specifically in the analysis. The other value, though, that we do look at in considering a reasonable assessment of what should be considered available is the average value that's been shown for July and August from 2015 through to 2020. And those are the two rows that I've left in darker text that allow a simple comparison of the average versus what we're looking at for showings so far for 2021. Now, if we could move to page 10, please. I wanted to point out some key observations from assessing what I would call the maximum amount that could be available versus what is shown in the resource adequacy program, what has been procured to date. And that's an important distinction as we move through this work. So a few observations from our stack analysis were that at the peak load hours through the afternoon, both looking at, when we look at the total amount of capacity that is available from our net qualifying capacity list and consider the average level of imports over the 2015 to 2020 period, the planning reserve margin is well above 25%. So the capacity to meet that time of day is out there and available, but how much has been contracted is a different point. When we look at the actual resource adequacy showings for the resources and intertie import at peak load, the planning reserve margin is approximately 16%. Now this means that the load-serving entities are meeting their obligations for showing capacity that is tied to the middle of the afternoon peak load period. Now when we look at the difference between what resources have not been picked up for resource adequacy, we do see that the bulk of these are, the difference is gas and hydro, where some generators have been picked up for some volume but not necessarily their maximum amount. And also some hydro showings are also for lower than their net qualifying capacity values. Now, here's where we have to transition, though, to also looking at the net peak hours. On the following slides, I do need to mention, because we're now getting more into the planning reserve margin assessment, that we're using the latest Energy Commission forecast, and we're also switching between looking at the average showings from the 2015 to 2019 period for imports to the actual showings so far for this summer. So this is a comparison then of the two bars on the left in the July chart show the net qualifying capacity amounts that are theoretically available versus the two bars on the right that show the 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. Situation for the resource adequacy showings. What we see is that while the stack of capacity available through the net qualifying capacity list has a planning reserve margin of 26% at peak and 18% at 8 p.m., the resource adequacy showings reflect procurement at about, the resource adequacy showings show that at 8 p.m. we are down to an 8.5% planning reserve margin, which demonstrates that we would be relying on uncontracted resources and uncontracted imports during that evening period. So that shift at the 8 o'clock window, given the other risk factors we've talked about, has become much more important. I should also mention that on this chart, additional measures that take place once we're in emergency conditions have not been added. This is looking at maintaining the planning reserve margin to avoid entering into emergency-type conditions and calling on emergency-type resources. If we move to page 10, please, page 12. This is the same graph for August, showing again the two bars on the left are showing the 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. scenario, looking at the total available resources, versus the two bars on the right showing the resource adequacy program showings, and the same trend continues through. With the stack of net qualifying capacity has a planning reserve margin of 24% and a 19% planning reserve margin being achievable at 8 p.m., but the resource adequacy showings reflect procurement to be about 15% planning reserve margin at peak, resulting in a planning reserve margin of about 10% at 8 p.m. So again in August, we would be relying on uncontracted resources or imports during that evening peak. Moving to page 13, please. So some key conclusions we've drawn from this work is that there is reliance, despite load-serving entities meeting their resource adequacy program showings tied to peak load, there is a risk of reliance on uncontracted resources in the net peak hours. The first two bullets repeat the details I've already walked through. The third bullet is particularly relevant. When we look at the gap to achieving and maintaining a 15% planning reserve margin at 8 p.m., and also take into account that there are resources that we are aware of that may have been procured by load-serving entities but are not shown in the resource adequacy program, that the gap appears to be in the 2,000 megawatt range. So that sets the stage for the situation we're looking at. I will now dive into a few more details about the capacity procurement mechanism itself. Oh, thank you. And I'm afraid that the utility terminology and jargon will continue to get deeper as more of this conversation now needs to be much more specific for the benefit of parties who are interested in submitting capacity offers for consideration. So, on page 15, we set out the provisions in our tariff and the framework that allows us to actually pursue this additional capacity. So we have the authority under our existing tariff to designate capacity procurement mechanism resources pursuant to a significant event. We also have the authority to set an initial term of 30 days via the intra-monthly competitive procurement mechanism process, and with an optional 60-day extension. We also then expect, based on this material, to exercise this significant event authority, issuing a 30-day procurement effective as soon as possible based on the existing intra-monthly CPM competitive solicitation processes, taking into account any additional offers that arrive as per our request, both for the month in which the designation will begin and consider the additional offers solicited through the market notice. We want to be clear that we may also issue additional designations and extensions of existing designations for August through October as conditions warrant. Page 16, please. So we set out a basic timeline here of how we plan to move through these steps. On June 29th, based on the factors that have already been cited, we did conclude that a CPM significant event exists. We sent out the public notification of intent on July 1st. We're holding the stakeholder call today. We are seeking offers through both mechanisms we have available, communication vehicles available, by July 7th, which is to express interest both through the ISO's city mechanism as well as submitting offers through the intra-monthly competitive solicitation process framework for months during the period of the expected significant event. Scheduling coordinators, of course, may continue to submit competitive solicitation process bids per the timeline established in our business practice manual that I know they're all very aware of. Our intention is on July 9th or as soon as possible thereafter to designate available capacity for at least the 30-day terms, and a 60-day extension is likely to be offered. And then we will, on an ongoing basis, continue to assess additional CPM requirements or extensions as needed. Oh, and I should have mentioned, CITI is an acronym for our application, Customer Inquiry and Dispute Information Application, and CIRA is also the California ISO Resource Adequacy Application. On page 17, please. So, offer submissions, we are asking scheduling coordinators to use both vehicles to ensure that the offer information is received and cross-referenced. So we are asking that scheduling coordinators wanting to submit offers should do so both through the CIRA program and the reference, the path is set out in this slide, as well as submitting a city ticket with a particular subject line so that we're sure we see those offers and that we can correlate them with the competitive solicitation procurement process. Now, for the month of July, please submit offers in city only, as the offer period in the CIRA application has already ended. Now, if we could move to page 18, please. So this provides a bit more detail. For the sake of time, I won't walk through each of these categories, but for any scheduling coordinator looking at submitting an offer, we do ask that they are careful about using the correct subject line so that this information can be extracted from the system very clearly, and that they include the key information that we set out on this slide. Also, for informational purposes, scheduling coordinators that would accept a designation based on compensation above the soft offer cap that is justified on a basis other than the tariff-based formula should also contact the ISO through a city ticket as quickly as possible so that we can take a look at your particular situation. And we also need people to employ that same subject line and resource information to help us move forward as quickly and cleanly as possible. Page 19, please. Regarding offers that are accepted through the capacity procurement mechanism, we do want to be clear that any resources designated under the CPM will have all of the same responsibilities and must offer obligations as other resource adequacy resources of the same type of resource. So how they're procured does not change the obligations for that resource type and category. Scheduling coordinators offering import resources into the CSP process will need import capability at the delivery point. And we also want to refer scheduling coordinators to Tariff Section 43A and the reliability requirements in Section 5 for more information. So, on my last slide, the next steps, we will be evaluating the capacity available through the intra-monthly CPM competitive solicitation process for any offers that are already there, as well as any new offers generated through this process. And we will also be continuing to explore options to firm up capacity as quickly as possible through October 2021. We are asking that stakeholders notify the ISO of potential availability through those mechanisms that I already talked about, or also contact the ISO customer service if you have any questions. The number is provided here. And you can also reach out directly to Abdul. His phone number is also provided in this this deck, and just to be clear, that's Abdul's home number, so he'll get it. No, just kidding. Sorry. That is his office. That is his business number. So anyway, on that note, I am finished with the deck. We would be happy to entertain questions.
Okay. So if you do have a question you want to ask it verbally, press #2. And just a reminder, if you state your name and affiliation first. I do have a couple of questions in the chat. So while people are queuing up on the phone, let me go ahead and read those questions. We have one from Dave Francis. He's asking, with the July CSP timeline expired, is any offer for July considered out of market? Second question, is the offer controlled by the CPM cap? So somebody from the ISO could respond.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Neil.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, anyway, this is David Zlotlo from Legal. Yeah, under the tariff, the ISO can go outside of offers to the CSP if we're unable to meet the need from what is offered to the CSP, and those designations are at the soft offer cap. And then just for folks who aren't familiar with this, our tariff puts a soft offer cap at a little over $6 per kilowatt month. And then parties that believe they have verified costs above that level are able to justify those at FERC, and if FERC agrees that the necessary showings have been made, then they're entitled to compensation at whatever costs they've been able to demonstrate per a general formula that's in our tariff. And then so if they, FERC does not agree with this showing, then the compensation will be at the cap, and that they would be, if you want to make one of these cost showings, and you haven't offered to the CSP, then you'd be compensated at the cap, and then if FERC later approves your request, then the difference can be made up later. So it's not like you're stuck at getting zero in the meantime. But anyway, that's just a little bit of background on that, and hopefully that answers the question there.
Yeah, let's follow up, David. He does have another question. Will import RA amounts be constrained to the unassigned available import capacity shown from step 13 of the 2021 import allocation process?
Abdul?
This is Abdul. The import alloc capability of a scheduling coordinator will constrain that scheduling coordinator's capability of offering imports that are coming through a specific intertie. So if a scheduling coordinator wants to offer us import capability from an import resource, they need to have import capability on that intertie that the resource is coming from to the Kaiser, is flowing into the Kaiser.
Yes. And I believe we did address that in the slide.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, another RA question from Jack Phillips. Are RA resources required to submit CSP offers?
CSP, yeah. So CSP offers are to be submitted by RA resources for the non-RA amount. So the RA amount cannot be offered into the CSP process. But if you have non-RA amount that is remaining uncontracted for, you can offer that into the CSP bidding process.
And as we clarified earlier, the window for submitting into the CSP process is already closed for July, so it's particularly important that people identify those offers through the city process. But for other months, then the CSP process should also be used.
Great, thank you. Another follow-up from Jack Phillips. Where can we get the exact soft offer cap?
The soft offer cap is set out in our tariff.
Yep. It's at $6.31 per kilowatt month.
Okay, our next question from Carrie Bentley. Would you like gas resources that expect to have frequent ambient derates due to temperature to still offer in their capacity?
Yeah, so it's Neil here. The requirement is to only offer what's available, and that's something that needs to be taken into account in their offers.
Okay, I'll keep going down to the chat questions. Patrick Cunningham, how much capacity is Kaiser targeting to procure?
So it's Neil here. We have not set a precise amount. As we're evaluating the capacity that becomes available through this solicitation, we will also be assessing the other changing parameters, including any updates we have on the load situation and other risk factors. So we did want to be try to be helpful about putting some data points out there indicating with the stack analysis that we see a gap of approximately 2,000 megawatts being what it would currently take based on the Energy Commission forecast to close the gap to achieve a 15% planning reserve margin. But in terms of the volume that we actually decide to act on, that's something we'll have to consider as we assess the offers and also look at the evolving conditions on the grid.
Great, thank you, Neil. Okay, we have a couple of questions from Brian Thaker. The first question, how is the ISO planning to allocate the cost of this procurement? Second question, were any of the July or August RA showing sufficient?
It's Neil here. I'll turn it over to Mark Richardson to explain the allocation of costs.
Thank you, Neil, and good morning, everyone. So the allocation of costs are detailed in Tariff Section 43A 8.5, which compares gross load to forecasted load.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on one moment. Let me just, this is David, to then further expand on that. So the idea is the costs are allocated to all, utilities in the TAC areas where the significant event occurs, which would basically be everywhere. And then further, on a load ratio shares, I think Mark was explaining.
Thanks, David. Okay, from Hong Lin, it's not clear to me, are RMR units included in the stack analysis?
I'm sorry, I may have missed part of the question. I believe it was asked if RMR units are included in the stack analysis. And
correct.
If that's the question, yes, they were.
Thanks, Neil. Looks like Amani Ahmed can read off.
Excuse me.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's Neil. I think we just want to double check the understanding, though. The questions around the soft offer cap just raised the concern that perhaps an impression is being created that we are only entertaining offers up to the soft offer cap. We do, to reiterate what I'd said earlier in the presentation, if stakeholders have offers that would go above the soft offer cap, we do encourage them to submit those offers as well. It would be helpful if they provided any details about why their costs go above the soft offer cap. That would ultimately still, of course, be a FERC determination on getting those costs approved, but we do not want to restrict offers at this point to people feeling that they can only submit offers up to the soft offer cap. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Neil. Okay, question from Amani Ahmed. In resources, offer bids for the time periods that fall outside the RA window? For example, can resources from the MCC bucket offer bids for holidays, weekend days, or hours outside, but in addition to the 4 to 9 p.m. window from the DR MCC?
I'm sorry, it's Neil here. These are monthly offers. We're not looking at daily or hourly offers. We are looking for monthly capacity offers.
Okay. From Ian White, what does the Kaiser's process look like if CSP requests do not result in adequate supply?
It's Neil here. We'll have to reassess the situation based on the offers that come in.
All right, another one from Dave Francis. Does Kaiser believe the CPM payment for July, August, September is equivalent to the bilateral RA market?
We're not in a position to comment on that.
Okay. Let's see, hold on one second. Brian, you had a second question. I'm trying to keep up with the chat here, Brian. Brian had a second question he said wasn't answered. Were any of the July or August RA showings deficient?
It's Neil here. I'm not aware of any deficiencies at this time.
Okay. By the way, we're just going through the chat questions. We will go to the phones shortly. I'm just trying to respond to the chat questions first. Let's see. From Alan Neck, given that the PRM targets peak and your analysis shows a deficiency, i.e. less than 15% at net peak, couldn't this same analysis be used to justify CPM in virtually any year?
Well, that's a broader question going forward about the needs for the resource adequacy program more broadly. And I think that'll be, well, some of these issues already have been a matter of discussion in various CPUC proceedings, and I expect they will be in the future.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Before I go to more chat questions, how many people do we have in the queue? Diana, I want to make sure we get to those questions as well.
We have about 7.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay, let me read a couple more from the chat, and then I'm going to go to the phone lines. I know we have about 15 minutes left. So Mark Smith, on slide 18, you suggest that bids can be submitted on a basis other than the tariff-based GFFC plus 20%. So are you accepting market-based bids? And if so, are you allowing imports to bid flexibility but not internal resources?
It's Neil here. As I mentioned earlier, we are willing to entertain offers. So if in doubt, please submit the offer and we will review it.
Okay, let's read one more from the chat, and then we're going to go to the phone. So from Stephen Keene, is the RA stack analysis based on actual RA showings or RA requirements?
The stack analysis is based on we have shown values for imports and other reasons. So it's based on showings for the RA comparison.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Let's go ahead and go to the phone.
Can I also, this is Mark Rotbeck, can I also chime in that it's not just the PRM stack analysis alone. It's the PRM stack analysis in light of the changing conditions with regards to drought conditions affecting the hydro, regard to the supply availability and the timing and delays associated with some of the expected capacity and some of the expected capacity that now may not be available for the summer. So it's not just the PRM stack analysis. It's a combination of the conditions in light of and overlay on what we're seeing in terms of the net peak stack analysis.
Thank you, Mark. That helps. Thank you.
So, Diana, let's go ahead and take the first caller in queue, please.
Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Hi, this is Noah Tom from Middle River Power. Just a question on, you mentioned that there were no collective deficiencies that you're aware of for July and August, but the ISO, from my understanding from the presentation, the ISO is going to CPM up to the 15% at 8 p.m. for all LRAs, even though it's some LRAs may have lower than a 15% PRM. But the cost will then be allocated pro rata to everyone. Is that a correct interpretation?
It's Neil here. I'm actually not in a position to clarify about individual LFCs. I should have mentioned that in aggregate, we demonstrated we're seeing planning reserve margins being met, but I can't get into individual LFC discussions.
Right. But for certain LRAs that are lower than 15%, the ISO will still CPM up to the 15% at 8 p.m. From what you're seeing, that there's only about an 8.5% PRM need or a supply at 8 p.m. in July.
We are looking we are looking at a 15% planning reserve margin as a basis for the CPM at 8 p.m., and then we will have to work through the mechanics, as Mark had indicated, about cost allocation.
Yeah, Noah,
okay.
This is David. Let me just Noah, let me reiterate on the cost allocation. It's not by LRA, it's by TAC area. It's basically the TAC areas for which the significant event has occurred, which is the basis for then allocating within that area. It does not look at which LRAs set PRMs at 15% or lower or higher or whatnot. That's not part of what the tariff covers.
Okay. And is the ISO using a different load forecast, or is it the same forecast that the CEC has created for the RE program, but only looking on an hourly basis at 8 p.m.?
It's Neil here. As I mentioned in the presentation, we've been relying on the latest Energy Commission forecast for the monthly peak values, and the hourly values as well. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. This is Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. Can you confirm you can hear me?
Good morning, Kathleen.
Hi, good morning. I want to thank Mark and Neil for going through this presentation. I really appreciate it. Lots of good information, so thank you. We do want to share that we've been thinking a lot about this since the notice came out yesterday. We're very supportive of you taking this effort to shore up the reliability. We are concerned that the current rules will drive an outcome where this procurement will result in compensation that will be meaningfully below market value, or frankly, even worse, fail to meet your procurement requirement due to a lack of interest. The reason that we're saying this is that the soft offer cap at $6.31 per kilowatt month is considerably lower than we see trading in the bilateral RA markets for these months. So we think it's crucial that we all acknowledge that in a well-functioning market, compensation should not be significantly lower compared to prevailing market prices, especially due to a cap that is suppressing those offers. I acknowledge that you said that there's this opportunity to indicate the willingness to accept designation above those offers. But the current tariff only supports that kind of showing on a cost basis. Since your process, the CSP process, is voluntary, it is in Kaiser's best interest, in our opinion, to allow suppliers to participate with market-type offers. Otherwise, frankly, we're a little skeptical that this solicitation will be successful. However, we're uncomfortable because recently Kaiser decided not to raise your soft offer cap, and now we're in this position, an undesirable situation, where we really only have the option to offer up to the cap well below market prices or to submit this cost-based filing at FERC, neither of which will allow us to reflect the opportunity cost that we would be foregoing by clearing through this process instead of the bilateral markets. Again, we appreciate you, asking us fees if we would accept a designation at prices above the soft offer cap on a basis other than the tariff-based formula. But we're unclear what this information will do, how you'd even use it, since the tariff does not allow for this basis. We do believe that this should be an option, though. So we do appreciate you throwing this out there and talking through it. We think that resource owners should be able to submit these offers that exceed the soft offer cap if the bilateral market support prices at that level. However, the tariff does not let us have that flexibility. In that light, we want to throw out there that we really do support Kaiser leadership. If you want to make, if you make the decision, we support any efforts of the Kaiser to pursue changes on an expedited basis that would allow offers based on opportunity costs of not transacting through the bilateral markets. We think the Kaiser should raise the soft offer cap above $6.31 per kilowatt month to an opportunity-based soft cap based on the bilateral markets. We want to echo, because I hear this in some of the answers, that they're, provide willingness to accept this designation and offers above the cap and go seek if FERC will give any latitude on the tariff, which we read is pretty firm on cost. We're concerned that if we would have to go to FERC and get approval on an opportunity cost basis, there's some pretty high risk on that for us. So we ask the Kaiser, please consider anything you can do to mitigate this risk, ideally by raising the offer cap, even on a waiver basis or expedited basis, in line with current market trends to help this market function better. We just thank you very much for listening and creating the space for us to participate today.
Kathleen, it's Neil here. Thank you very much for the comments. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Diana? Yeah, thank you. We'll go to the next question, please.
All right. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Mary Lynch with Constellation, and I had a couple of questions back on slide 4, and maybe while we're going there, just one further clarification on the cost allocation, and that is there a circumstance where any of these costs could be assigned to deficient LSEs? Like, for instance, I guess the July and August month-ahead showings are done, but if there's a deficiency in the September month-ahead showing, would these costs get allocated out to deficient LSEs first before using the load ratio share allocation? Or is load ratio share always used for significant events despite what else might be going on with showings?
It's Neil here. I think the short answer is I don't believe that that's the framework that's set out in our tariff, and we will have to follow the letter of the law set out in our tariff on cost allocation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just to follow up on that, this is David really quickly. That's correct. If we're doing a significant event designation, we have to follow the rules for cost allocation for a significant event. If we are issuing a CTM because of an individual LSE deficiency, then we will allocate per those rules, which of course do call for the cost going to the deficient LSE.
Okay, but because you're doing this procurement in advance of when the deficiency might be revealed, this will stay just a generic load ratio share allocation, right?
I mean, that might be the result, but it may be that that's how it winds up.
Okay. And then back on slide 4, thanks for going back there. The second bullet, the unforeseen limitations, I just want to understand what that means. Unforeseen because of the heat and you're expecting thermal derates, or is this something that's specific to specific resources that are now not going to be available that were originally expected to be available?
It's Neil here. When I was looking at that bullet, I was more referring to generating units that have already experienced some sort of difficulty that were expected to be available through the summer, but that's not likely to be the case for whatever failure reason took them off.
Okay. And I presume that kind of information, that's not publicly available, though, what those difficulties are?
Yeah, no.
Okay. And then in the fourth bullet, the delays beyond summer, are these known delays, or are these just delays that you're getting some unofficial word on, or What's the nature of the delay? Is it just anticipated or is it for sure?
A bit of both. We're following projects and working with generators as they move through the new resource interconnection process. And as generators are moving forward, some of them have been experiencing different types of either material or construction delays. For these types of projects, it doesn't take much to push you off into a 1 month delay. So there have been some delays we're aware of, and others are doing the best they can, but could experience delays as well. So just generically, we've been following what's been happening very closely with the generation and storage development, and we've seen a bit of both. So we have a few that are at risk of potential delay, and we've seen some other delays that have actually occurred.
Okay, and these are mostly the resources that were procured in response to the 3,300 megawatt mandate, IRP mandate?
When you say mostly, no, we have resources that are coming online now that have been procured through various authorizations in the past, including the 3,300, as well as some perhaps that are moving forward that weren't a result of an actual procurement authorization anyway.
Okay. And then the last question on the next bullet about the uncertainty of demand-side resources. Again, are those just projected uncertainties, or are there some elements of those procurements that are, were authorized but are known they're not going to be ready in time or available?
We understand from the Public Utilities Commission that there is concern around the resource, some of these resources materializing. I can't get into more details than that. It's just a concern around the pace of development and pickup, and we're concerned. And I should mention that it's a combination, as Mark said earlier, it's a combination of all of these risks and uncertainties moving into what's looking to be a very challenging summer from a weather perspective that put a finer point on the need to ensure that our planning reserve margin supply cushion is as fully stocked as it can be going into the summer. So these are not single individual contributors adding up. These are just other factors that put more emphasis on the need to be as prepared as we can for what's shaping up to be a very challenging summer with the weather events that we're already seeing.
Thank you.
Moving on to the
okay. What do we have in queue, Diana?
There are 4 more.
Now we're close to the end of the meeting, so we'll go ahead and take the next question.
Okay. Caller.
Hi, this is Carrie. Oh, thanks. This is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. I was just wondering, if you don't receive enough offers or people turn down kind of unsolicited CPMs, will the Kaiser consider making an emergency tariff filing to increase the cap? I am concerned that it is significantly out of market. The bilateral RA price is at least double the cap.
We're wanting to see what shows up before we land on any next steps, so I really can't speculate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we are at the scheduled end time. So what I know there were quite a few questions, and there are some folks in the queue, and we weren't able to get to your question, but you are welcome to either send those questions to Citi. You can call customer service, and we also have Abdul's number on this slide. So thank you. We really appreciate your participation today and all your interest, and enjoy the rest of your day and the long weekend ahead.